Hey, so today I'm speaking with Hana, the Suburban Witch. Hannah's down in Australia, and I just kind of found her by a thought in my head, had me look up Suburban Witch because I figured somebody else must have thought of that before. So that's how I found her. So thanks for coming, Hannah.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, and I clicked with like just the way you wrote and the way you presented yourself online and just how you communicate. And I was like, oh, this is a cool chick. So then I, signed up for your mailing list and just followed you on Instagram from there on. And it was probably like 3 months ago or something like that. I don't remember, but fairly recently anyway. And I did take your candle class. And not that you knew, maybe you knew that, but I don't know. But that was the only thing of yours that I've actually enrolled in or whatever. But I just appreciate everything that you put out to the world. So thanks for coming on my show.
That's lovely to hear. I did see your name on the candle magic class list. How did you
Right.
find it? Like, did you enjoy it? Was it new? Was
It
it?
was it was cool for me. I mean, because I like my story is the witch part came last. Like I was raised not in as extreme of a religious situation as yours, but definitely like Roman Catholic. My dad's a deacon, so like all of the bookshelf in the metaphysical section was like completely. I was enamored with all of it, but I stayed away from anything that said witch because that was scary. So like a couple like a year ago or something, I got like a witch book, and I was like, oh my god, it's so basic, it's so easy, it's so obvious, and I really liked it. But I'd never had played or practiced with candle magic or anything, so it intrigued me enough. So I liked it. It was cool. And I didn't interpret like there's so many different ways you can go with it. So I didn't like do the melting of the wax into water to interpret that. Like that's something I haven't tried, but just coating the candle in the herbs and everything with intention. I mean, it's just so cool. So yeah, I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and it burned really evenly, and it was I did a protection aspect. So I just wanted to amp up my protection, and I figured that was a good way to do it. So, but I
Oh,
loved how you wrote your notes, and I liked your instruction, and everything was concise and clear. So I appreciated that, the
oh.
organizational aspect of business.
Yes, I try and make it so it's easy for everyone depending on whatever level they're at. So people that have never come in contact with spell work or witchcraft before, and people that are coming with religious trauma. So I do cover a little bit of that as well. Like, let's chat about it. This is some things that people think could happen, and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that people aren't going in scared as well, and alleviating those fears and those doubts around it. And it's such a versatile form of magic, and we do it so much in our normal life that we probably don't even realize it as magic. So
Mm-hmm.
just kind of adding magic into our normal lives. And then also, if we want something, a specific intent, it's giving us a really quick, easy, and accessible tool that we can use. So I think candle magic's amazing. It's wonderful. It's a great,
Yeah.
great first step for a lot of witches as well.
Yeah, for me, it would like whenever I'd go into metaphysical shops that had like the witchy candles, I was always like put off by them. Like they seemed weird to me. But like just understanding like color therapy and like chakras, it's not so it's not freaky or anything. Like
Yep.
I always have like this, I want to be with everything white. Like I wear a lot of black, but I do like I want white sheets. I want everything to be white and clean. So with candles, I would think I would just always do white because white feels pure to me, but the colors are significant. So what
Mm-hmm.
got you, so people can understand about you, like what got you to where you are? I think it's only been like in the last decade or so that you got into this stuff.
Yeah, so it has been a journey of stepping stones, like every stone cracking me open a little bit more in a way. Um, when I was a child, I was very interested in witches and magic and the darker side of life, but I wasn't allowed to be interested in that. So it was kind of done in secret. I wasn't allowed to watch Snow White because there was a witch in it. I wasn't allowed to watch the Smurfs because there was a warlock in it. Like, there was a lot of things we weren't allowed. Most of our television, our radio, all of that was Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up Pentecostal, evangelical, and it was a very sheltered bubble. The only friends we had were Christian, so there wasn't a lot of dark aspects in that, right? However, when we'd go down to the video store back when they existed, I remember I would go in and I'd pick up things like there was The Craft, obviously, which I still have never seen. The Craft, there was I think any of like the haunted house style ones. There was one like werewolf in New York. I don't know what they were. But I remember when my mum wasn't looking, I'd go and like read the back of it, like this secret, little thrill I would get. Just like, oh, look, there's this other world that I could be a part of, but I'm not allowed. And so when I was about 16, my mum split up with my dad, and I chose to live with my mum, and we were told we weren't welcome back at the church because we're living in sin.
Right.
So that was my entire community, my entire life, everything changed pretty much overnight. It was trial by fire in a way, just thrown out into the real world and deal with it. And it was great because in a way I was like, well, I can do all this stuff now. I can go and read Harry Potter. I can go and explore this and that. And along with that, there was this big, deep anger with the church as well. So I was very rebellious. I just went and did everything I wasn't supposed to do, which was fantastic. It was freedom. It was finding myself. And I explored for a while. And I remember being very anti-religion for a bit. I don't do churches anymore. I'm still religious or spiritual, or I believe in God, but I don't do churches. And then at some point it got into maybe I don't even believe in God. I don't believe in anything. Maybe there's nothing. And that only lasted for a very short time, I think, because deep down I was like, oh, I don't really believe that. There is definitely something there. I ended up moving overseas. I went over to Canada, met my husband over there. And it was probably the last time I stepped foot into a church willingly was, it must have been Christmas 2000 and I was 22. I was 22. So it's about 11 years ago. 11 years ago. And I took my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, took him to the church with me. I was like, let's just go up to the church up the road on Christmas Day. I feel like that's something we should do. And he was like, okay, I mean, you don't go to church anyway, but all right, I'll come with you. And he was raised Catholic and very different to what I was raised. We go in there and we sit down, and I think I don't even know what type of church this was, but it was not like my church. Mine was like a mega church. It was very much, if you have heard the term, happy clappers. There was like Christian rock music. It was like a full-on concert every week. This was like old school chapel style. They had a hymn book. And I was like, oh, wow, this is very different. I don't even know what's happening here. And that was the last time I willingly went in, because I walked out and went, that wasn't for me. That was so not for me. Oh my goodness, that's just really shown me how much it's not for me. And over the years as well of that, like exploring, I'd done a few things that were terrifying. I think when I was 20, so it's probably 2 years prior to that last church experience, I had my cards read and my palm read when I was traveling through Singapore. And the entire time going through that, I was like incredibly excited, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But I kept hearing that the devil's whispering in her ear. The devil is telling her what to say. Every time I was like, oh, wow, that's right. I resonate with that. I'm like, no, that's just the devil telling her. It was this horrible.
That's scary. That's a bad feeling. Yeah.
And I now know that voice wasn't mine.
It was his ego.
It was not God. Yeah. It was a manufactured voice that the church had taught me to expect, or taught me to tell myself.
Totally.
When anything was, what they said you're not allowed to do, right? So that was challenging. I didn't touch anything from that for a little bit, but it was very exciting at the time. I remember she'd also said that my current boyfriend was not going to be my husband, and I was like shocked. And then, lo and behold, it was not. So a year later, met my actual boyfriend husband. That sounds weird. Boyfriend who became mine. Anyway, so then on those travel journeys after Canada, I went and traveled by myself through the United States and through South America. And when I was in the United States, I was actually staying in Louisiana. I was working on a farm there for a bit. And I had this incredibly terrifying supernatural experience.
Oh.
And this is not the way most people would be, I guess, opened up spiritually. When we have our spiritual awakenings, people are like, oh my gosh, I had this like beautiful healing experience and I saw my guides and it was just like, wow, and beauty and light. No, mine was not that. Oh. Mine was what do you call it, when you're held down on the bed, sleep paralysis. Yeah, experienced some sleep paralysis, terrifyingly so. And not like most people when they have sleep paralysis, it is like they feel a weight on their chest. and they can't move. I could move, and it wasn't a weight on my chest, but I could feel like someone had my hands and was holding me on the bed. I could lift my head up, but my hands were stuck there. And this just overwhelming feeling of terror. And it was horrid. And then the next night I saw someone sit on the bed. I didn't see the person, but I saw the imprint on the bed. It was then that I told someone about this. I was like, something's happening in the trailer that I'm staying in out there, and I feel crazy. Has anyone experienced anything here before? And the girl that I was staying with, she said, oh, what have you brought back from New Orleans? Like, she believed me straight away. I was like, you don't think I'm making it up? She's like, it's Louisiana. My best friend's house is haunted. This is there. Like, it was, Civil War grounds, battlegrounds everywhere. Everyone's got a ghost. And I was like, okay, cool. So she got one of her friends who was a witch. Firstly, he was a male witch, which I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. And it totally is, which is gender neutral. And the second thing, I was like, he's a witch. Like he thinks he's a real witch. Okay. Look at me now. Anyway, he came over, and whatever he was doing, I was like, I don't know what this guy's doing, but hell, if it works, it works. Now I look back, I'm like, okay, so he first did some divination, he used a pendulum, and then he cleansed the space, and then he put some protective wards in place. I had no idea at the time what I was looking at. I was like, okay, he's just waving a stick around, cool.
Right.
So anyway, when he left, I remember that night and the previous nights, right? I'd gone into fear response and started praying, listening to Hillsong music. That was how I was trying to stop it, and that was not working.
Right.
The night that I slept there after he'd come in and done his witchy goodness, I remember lying there awake, still being like, is it going to happen again? Is something going to happen? This is like, I'm still really scared. And I heard scraping on the roof. And my logic brain's like, it's just a tree in the wind on the road, just a tree on the wind. But that was all that happened. And then the next morning when I woke up, walked out of the trailer, turned around and looked up, and I was like, yeah, there's no trees close enough for that. And it just kind of solidified the fact that, okay, there was something. There was definitely something.
Yeah, and you were being protected.
And that protected me. What he did worked. And I was like, So that was another like little piece of the puzzle to like open me up. And when I did end up going back to New Orleans, because I didn't experience anything else after that, I went into a voodoo practitioner's shop. It was called Voodoo Authentica. And I just said, hey, I had this weird thing happen. I don't know if you have any insight around that. And we'd figured out that I'd actually done this graveyard tour just before going to that. I'd done it the day before. And it was a beautiful tour through all these gorgeous graveyards and cemeteries, which a lot of them you can't actually go into anymore. They've since shut down to tourists. But they're beautiful, and it's where the sets of things like, Interview with the Vampire was filmed, the original movie, and where Anne Rice had written about, and I saw Anne Rice's house. It was like this amazing thing for my little like gothic horror heart that I explored in my late teens. And this practitioner said, look, you've got some spiritual gifts here. You're not aware of them yet, but you're pretty open to spirit, and you've gone into this graveyard. You've not known the graveyard etiquette, which he then taught me. Walk in backwards, walk out backwards, leave an offering. You never came. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll do that from now on. And basically it's like, look, something just was like, wow, there's,
it's a bright light
that we can attach to. She can sense us, and we can get some energy off her. So that was a lot of this, I guess. Okay, wow, there's something that I have. I don't know what that is. File that away for later. And also, I can never tell anyone about any of this because no one is ever going to believe me. It was kind of this like secret little side quest that I had personally. And I wrote it all down, and I just kept it safe there and hidden, but I hadn't accepted it yet. When I finally got back home to Australia, I was still very much into spooky stuff. So I was doing ghost tours and all of that. And that's when my psychic clairs started to really kick in. We were on this ghost tour where we walked into this house, and it was at this asylum in Victoria.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Never knew that.
It was like a midnight tour as well.
Of course.
So it's probably 1 a.m. or something. And we walk into this house. And the moment I stepped in, I was like, did they have horses in here, why do I smell? It smells like a stable, like straw and hay. That's all I can smell right now. And everyone on this tour is looking at me like I'm insane. And my husband's like, are you having a stroke? Like, no one can smell this. What are you on about?
Right.
And for me, it was such an overpowering, strong smell. I'm like, are you kidding me? No one can smell this. You're all having me on. Seriously? And it was very bizarre. So I'm just standing there going, okay, well, I can definitely smell it. Maybe I'm just more sensitive to it than other people. Next thing you know, the guide finished locking up, because he would open the doors, let us all through, and then lock it behind us, because he's like, I'm not walking through afterwards to lock everything up, because it's just not happening. So he comes in and he goes, who was saying something about hay? And I was like, me. And he's like, so that's very odd, because this place hasn't been used for a very long time. However, this is where they used to perform lobotomies. And back then, they did not have running water. So they would cover the floor in hay and straw, and that would soak up the blood, and they'd sweep it out at the end of the day.
Gross.
And I was just like, what? And everyone just sort of turns to look at me. I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
Oh my
So that
Lord.
prompted some deep diving into what the hell just happened to
The psychic
me.
senses, yeah.
Yeah, and I discovered the psychic senses, and so it started to really get me into just being open to it and looking more into the spiritual aspects, rather than just, I guess, the gothic horror style vampires and ghosts and all of that I was so drawn to. But all of that was then, I guess, what also opened me up to this. So it also answered some questions for me, because when I was in the church growing up, they believed in spiritual gifts, but I was told I had the gift of basically I had a neuromancy. That's what I call it now. They didn't call it then. It was just the gift of dreams. So I could interpret dreams. And I also got given visions from God. Okay, so it's the gift of prophecy. I only had 2 visions, and they were both had at the altar of the church, lying on the ground after being, prayed on by the priest, by the pastor, and slain in the spirit. So you're lying on the ground praying, usually crying. Some people are shaking. Like, it's very intense experience. And the first time I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I had this vision of me. I could see my hands sort of in front of me, and these children in front of me, barefoot on like this dirt ground. And all I could associate this image of was, oh, I'm obviously going to go to some third world country and be a missionary. That's God's telling me that's what I'm going to do. So I thought that was what I was going to do. Went through the whole church experience, was like, I'm obviously going to be a missionary. I'm going to be a preacher. This is, God's role for me. And then when we get kicked out of the church, it was like, okay, maybe I just made it all up. All right, maybe I made it all up. But when I started to learn about these psychic gifts, that's when I was like, oh, maybe I didn't make it up. Because I did actually go and work at an orphanage in Cambodia, and had that same experience where for a split second I was like, I've seen this before. I've done this before. And I was like, oh, I've seen this before.
Wow.
It was that vision, but I'm just volunteering. I'm not a missionary.
Right.
Maybe I just got the meaning wrong.
Right.
Maybe I just interpreted it wrong. So once I started learning about these psychic abilities, it kind of started to make a lot of things make sense. And I realized I'd been experiencing psychic stuff a lot and just thought it was normal, or thought it happened to everybody, or just explained it away. And I think a lot of people do that. I'm not alone in that.
Totally.
A lot of people, they're like, oh, I do that all the time. That's normal. And you're like, no, that's a psychic sense.
Exactly.
And we can develop them, and we can work with them. And especially when it comes to, using divination tools and stuff, we can use these tools to access them quicker and get the information faster. And the very first divination tool I ever did was tea leaf reading, because it felt like the safest one. Tarot came later. But yeah, tea leaf reading, using herbs, and that's where I started to sort of explore the term witch and being a little bit witchy, and it just kind of grew from there until I was like, actually, yes, I'm absolutely a witch.
Did someone ever read your leaves? Is that what got you going into that direction?
No one ever read them for me. I completely did it myself. I read a bunch of books, watched a bunch of videos, listened to podcasts. I just absorbed all of the information that I could around this art form.
Yeah.
And kept a very, very clear journal. I called it my tasseomancy journal. And I would read for myself. I'd read for my husband. And after a little while, I'd sort of go and look back at the previous readings and realized, oh my God, I predicted the birth of our daughter. Oh my God, we predicted this. Oh my gosh, that's come true too. And that as well was a bit of a confirmation to like, oh, okay, this stuff really works. What else is there? What else can we find? What other tool can I add to my basket? So yeah, it was super fun, but I've still never had like an actual tea leaf reader do my tea leaves. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Well, I've never had them done for me, but I will interpret my own like coffee
Yeah.
grinds at the end of a cup, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I get
Well,
different images sometimes.
Cassiomancy is interesting because it doesn't specifically mean tea leaf reading. It means reading the cup. So
Mhm.
you can use that term for coffee grounds and for wine sediment and anything that you find in the bottom of your cup.
Right.
I preference tea leaves. That's what I love to do. But yeah, you can absolutely use coffee grounds and all sorts of things. And I'm the same. I don't go to someone else because I just do it myself.
Yeah, I know. It's really neat. And like I had one time I had what was left behind in my coffee mug. Like I had brought a lot of times I bring my coffee with me, like in a regular mug, even though it's dangerous and stupid in the car to do that. But I just prefer it. Just prefer it. But I had left my mug in the car and then I went to a thing and when it came back out, it was like perfectly a yin yang. I was like, well, that was pretty cool, you know. So I've had some interesting, you know, images, or sometimes even while pouring like the cream in my coffee, I can do a little bit of a scrying thing where like I'll see something kind of come together. Like so these things, like you said, they're just natural. They you know, there's things that we just do. And like I didn't even know that I forget the term you used for dream interpretation, but I was like, I was interpreting dreams like all the time since I was younger, you know? So
Yeah, so that's oniromancy. So that's when we have a dream and then we can tell what the meaning of that dream would be for ourselves and for other people as
and I'm
well.
like,
So
isn't it clear? Like, duh. Like you just like you cut through all the details and you see the meaning, duh. And like my best friend will call me and be like, can you tell me about my dream? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I just repeat it back to her basically. But and then, you know, not everyone can interpret mine. It's like I have to interpret mine. But it's
yeah,
fun to try to dissect them anyway.
I find dreams really fascinating.
Mm.
And I think all forms of divination, they all share this like sort of commonality in terms of interpretation. And once you learn that, you could really do anything that you're drawn to. I have a friend who he's a psychic medium and he can read carpet. So he will walk into
I do that. I used to have a tapestry hanging in my wall
yeah,
at work, and I would just I didn't even mean to. Like I would just look over at it, and I'd see images, and then I would report it back to the client and be like, "Oh, by the way,
yeah,
that's what I saw." So yeah,
yeah.
reading carpet sounds about normal to me.
Exactly. And it's, he'd see the images that were from just people walking around and whatever, and he'd be able to determine meanings from that.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it from I don't know, maybe you're standing in the shower. Give this a go, someone. Standing in the shower, you're looking at the tiles, and maybe they've got some sort of like marble pattern or whatever in them.
Mm-hmm.
Stare at them where your eyes are sort of softened
Right.
and see what you see. And does that mean anything to you? Could that be relevant to you in some way?
It's the
And
coolest thing.
it's just such a cool thing. If you experiment with it, it's amazing the stuff that you can find.
And
And just
without trying too hard, you know, that's the thing, is just to kind of do it without thinking. And
yeah.
one time I was in the shower and we had like the texture of the shower door was bumpy or whatever. And while I was washing my hair, I like look at it and I see a face and I'm like, who's the skinny Santa Claus? I guess this is a new guide for me because he looks like a skinny Santa Claus, but I don't know. And in the meanwhile, I was learning about Lao Tzu and reading, you know, Wayne Dyer's book, like Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. So I was interested in taking like a deep dive on Lao Tzu, and I hadn't opened up the book yet. Then later that day, I opened up the book and there's a picture of Lao Tzu. I'm like, oh, that's the skinny Santa Claus I saw in the shower. So
Yeah, and that is like instant validation, right? You're
yeah.
like, oh, cool. Like I'm not crazy. That was a legitimate thing. It's a little precognitive thing that I've just had going on there. That's
Yeah.
super cool.
Because I
Mhm.
sensed that he was a guide that was around. So I guess he was because I was learning about him. You know? So it's just like,
Yeah.
I just love it.
Yeah. When I talk
Fun.
about spirit guides and when people figure out who they are, whether that's through a dream, through a meditation, through looking at a shower,
Yeah.
whatever it is, usually you get validation within 3 days in a way that you weren't expecting. And that's kind of
Mhm.
like, yep, it's me. I'm here. You're correct. Ta-da. So that's a perfect example, what you just described. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Well, when did you start like making it into a business where people were paying for you to do things?
So when I was, gosh, it was I think I've been in business now for 5 years.
Mhm.
And so we were living in the state of Victoria, which is the southeast of Australia. And at the time, so my previous career was actually in the construction industry,
Mhm.
and I had been preparing to take my builder's examination. So that is basically to register as a builder
Mhm.
and to open my own building company. And that was basically my dream. So I was studying for that, and I was pregnant at the time. Oh, so this is 6 years ago, pregnant at the time, studying for this. And I remember one of my teachers said, "Hey, I'm just going to give you some advice, and I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way." He goes, "But since you're pregnant right now, I would suggest you wait until after you've had your baby to sit your examination." And I was like, "Why? Like, I can obviously do everything I can do now. Why would I delay it?" And he's like, the board, the board that does the basically final call, they're all very old white men. And he goes, "Now I know you're good at this and can do it, but they're going to judge you the moment you walk in the room. And
Mhm.
they're going to be harder on you than they would on anyone else because they probably just don't think you can do it."
Mhm.
And he's like, "It's just because you have to pay to sit this test. It's very intense." And he's like, "Look, just delay it. Just delay it by a couple of months and come back and do it." And I was like, "Okay, fine." So I put that down and I was like, "All right, I'll just delay it for a little bit." Obviously, had my child. At the same time, my husband got a call. He had been trying for about 3 years to get into the military here. And we'd kind of given up on that because he had, he broke his wrist and had to wait another year. And then he had knee surgery, had to wait another year. It was all these little things that I was like, obviously, that's just not your path. I'm just going to focus on my dreams and go and be a builder. Anyway, so as soon as I pretty much put down that building thing, like, I'll just wait a minute, he gets a call up saying, "Hey, we want you to come to officer training." And they wanted him to come before our daughter was born. I was like, "Can you just please delay it? Like, just don't miss the birth." So, like, all right, 3 months after the birth, you're coming to officer training. So he did that. He got in, and I hadn't really put it through my brain yet. But as soon as he was in, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. This means I can't be a builder because with the military, you move all over the country, sometimes
Mhm.
outside the country.
Mhm.
With builders registrations, it's by state, and I would have to sit the same exam in a different state,
Yeah.
pay again, and keep paying for the registration in the other one. And you can't. There's different regulations in every state, and it started to become this big, like, overwhelming, like, okay, well, whose career,
Right.
which career do we go with? And so it was kind of this, I guess sometimes they call it like an ego death. That was my identity. That was what I did. I'd done that for, years and all this time and all this effort. And I had to really let that go. Went through a bit of a dark night of the soul. And the thing that really helped me through that, as well as being, postpartum and some
Mhm.
issues with that as well. The thing that helped me through that was obviously my tarot, my spiritual practice, my guides, my altar, everything that I had that really, really helped me through it. Crystals, meditation, just all of these things were like my rocks.
Mhm.
And after about a year and a bit, my husband was like, "Okay, we now have to move to Perth," which was the complete opposite side of the country. And that was when he was like, do you want to go back to work? Do you want to do something over there? What do you want to do?" And I'm like, "You know what? Maybe people would pay for a tarot reading." And he's like, "Yeah, they absolutely would.
Yeah.
Probably your astrology stuff as well," because I've been teaching myself astrology. And I'm like, "Can I do that though?" Because I was still very much in the closet. I'd pack my altar away anytime someone came over. I didn't want anyone from the church. We were still friends with a few people from the church. I didn't want anyone to know. So it was this secret part of me. But that move to the other side of the country was like, you know what? Stuff it. I don't know anyone over there. Yeah, let's do it. So I did. I moved over there and opened my business. And it was like that move was the best thing that ever happened to me. That's also when I decided to dye my hair pink, something I had wanted to do, I swear, my entire life. I was like, "I want pink hair." But it was always like, "No, it's not a natural color. You can't do that at church." And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Your hair's not a natural color." You're like, "What do you want about?" You're not naturally blonde. But it was just never allowed. And I was like, "You know what? I'm going to dye my hair pink." So I did dye my hair pink, and then I dyed it purple, and then back to pink, and then a little bit of blue. Like, really had fun with it. And I know that shocked people, but I felt like me, like I was finally me.
Mhm.
And it almost like opened up my entire world. And once I started doing those readings like full time, basically, I had been doing them. Like, I'd worked for this psychic group for a while, but I mean, it wasn't my business,
Yeah.
and it was still fairly anonymous, right?
Mhm.
So that didn't feel like this big leap. But this time it was like, no, this is me, this is my face, this is my name being out there. And it just felt so good. And so, yeah, since then, I think it's almost like this fire was lit, and it's
That's
been
awesome.
tremendous. And I look back and I'm like, well, what was the point in all that building stuff?
Mhm.
And I look back and I'm like, you know what? When I look in my chart, I can see exactly why I was drawn to that. But
Mhm.
B, my dad's a builder. And I'm like, I obviously had to really I had to disappoint him to be myself. And
Mhm.
that was a big lesson, right? Huge lesson. Because if I had become a builder, that he would have loved that. He would have been so proud. He would have told everyone. I know we had a a point to talk about and a point of something of interest. Since doing this, he's still Christian. He doesn't talk to me about my business at all.
Yeah.
Will not bring it up. Doesn't want to hear about it. Just
Mm.
kind of goes, "You're happy. That's all I care about." But I don't want to hear about it, which
Yeah.
is hard, right?
Mhm.
He's also he breeds Angus beef on his farm, and he also has dairy cattle. And I'm vegan, right? So I've disappointed him in lots of ways,
Yeah.
going completely opposite. And I'll tell you what, our relationship has actually never been better. So sometimes we really have to, again, it's kind of that death of how other people see us, and
Yeah.
allowing that to change. It can teach us so much and really bring us into more authentic alignment with ourselves.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. It's important to be free and be who you are and who you've always meant to be. So that's cool that I like that your hair is pink.
I love that my hair is pink. I love it.
Um, so your primary thing, is your primary thing doing readings, or is it now more classes? Is that like more your major?
Yeah, so I obviously still do readings for people. So I call them guidance calls, because what I used to do is I would have tarot readings that they could book, or they could book astrology.
You want to peek at one at the other, probably during
Yeah.
both.
And
Yeah.
and then we'd be, I'd do a reading, and I'm like, oh, I just feel like I could really answer your question better if I had your
Draw your
chart,
card.
or if I did this. And I was like, I feel like I'm limiting myself. So I ended up just calling them guidance calls, because that's what I
Mhm.
ended up doing. Because some people would book me just to help them interpret a dream. Some
Right.
people would book me because they wanted to ask, like, I'm on this journey, what books should I read?
Hmm.
So I was like, oh, I've been limiting myself this whole time. Sometimes people literally just want my advice.
Right.
So now they're called guidance calls, and it's half an hour or an hour.
Hmm.
So people can book those. They can be a little bit limited in terms of when I offer them,
Hmm.
solely because my clients are all over the world,
Hmm.
and I obviously am in the time zone that I'm in, and my husband's away a lot because he's still in the military. So it's it is not open all the time. I only have a few spots available for that one. So then I found that doing classes was a great way to offer that knowledge to everyone.
Hmm.
I think I'm a good teacher. So it's something I always loved. So it's been something that's been really helpful this year as well, to be able to offer people classes on tarot, to offer people classes on candle magic, like we talked about,
Hmm.
on psychic senses. And in September this year, I'm reopening my psychic divination class to new students. So it hasn't had new students for over a year, and I've redone the whole thing and relaunching it. So it's going to have more students in there now. It's like a deep dive into the psychic senses
Hmm.
and how to use divination in your practice and in your life. So it teaches a variety of different forms of divination, from the chiromancy you were describing earlier, where you drip the wax into the water, which is a form of free-flowing divination, capnomancy, which is reading the smoke. There
Hmm.
is tarot, there is astrology, there is palmistry, pendulums. So we go through all of it. It's a very, very in-depth course, and it's super, super fun. And it's just a way that I can get that information
Yeah,
to.
to more people, to empower them.
Mhm.
Do you do them as like weekly calls, or is it like pre-recorded and then you do a catch-up call? Like how's it set up?
Yeah, so it's pre-recorded.
Hmm.
So you could technically go at your own pace, but you get access to each module every week for 7 weeks. So 7 modules, and they come out once a week. So as much as sometimes people want to rush ahead, it's not always best to. Sometimes it's good to take that week to really let it integrate and sit with it. Each one gets a little bit of homework as well. So if you race ahead, you're not going to get time to do the homework.
Right.
So 1 a week, and then we do have bi-weekly psychic development circles. So every 2 weeks we meet up on Zoom, and that time does change from either my morning or my night, just so I can access a few different time zones.
Yeah.
And they're also recorded, and everyone gets access to those as well.
Right.
And there's bonus resources. There's so much in there. It's going to be super fun. And they've got access, like they can go back and redo the course as many times as they want. So I've had students that have said they've done it 3 times now, just to, reintegrate. And each time they're like, oh, I've got, a deeper layer, or I've realized something new this time. So it's really wonderful to hear their feedback and to see how it's changed. A few of my previous students from last year are now practicing psychic mediums. They're like, this has just given me the boost that I needed to really access those gifts.
That's awesome. And then
amazing.
The bi-weekly calls, that's for the community support aspect of things, because I feel like that is just as valuable as the content, because I do a course once a year now. I did it for the last 4 years. I've played with it, but this year I'm just it's once a year. And it's 6 weeks, and we do what it is to be an empath, how to protect your energy, chakras, crystals, coming out of the closet, and then psychic development is the last week. I almost wish that mine ended when yours started, so it could be a continuation, but mine probably starting at the same time as yours, it's the end of September. But it's that the magic is the community, it's awesome to have the information and to learn the content, but to have that bouncing off of each other, and hearing other people's experiences and how they applied it, and what you read on the other person makes total sense, even though you don't know what the heck you're talking about, I love that. It's so awesome.
Yeah. And in those calls, I do psychic development exercises. So we join as a circle. Doesn't matter where anyone is in the world, we can do that energetically. And I will do exercises in there. So hey, you guys are up to this module now. You've learned this, this, and this. So we're going to do an exercise that utilizes those skills. And we're all going to do it. And we're all going to offer our readings. And I'm going to give you feedback immediately so that you can get validation on what it is. So I'll hold up something and they have to read it. And then we turn it around and see what it actually was.
It's great.
It's so fun. And people are shocked. These are the psychic development calls. They're the ones that people say, they're like, I didn't know I could do that. How did I know that? How did I see that? And it just gives them the confidence, because when you're doing it by yourself, yes, you can validate things yourself. When you've got someone else on the other side of the world, and there's no way you can't know the thing that they're doing, right? You do it anyway. That's what makes the biggest difference, I think, in people. It's
so fun. I know those are my favorite classes, are the psychic development classes. I mean, I would do them locally, just small groups of people, and it was always so fun. And the things that people would just say, and they're saying it with big question marks behind their head, and the person they're reading is just oh my, crying. It's just the coolest thing ever. I did one where I printed out pictures of famous people who, alive and dead and whatever, and just kind of before I put the picture in the envelope, I heavily sent it more energy, and then folded it up and stuck it in an envelope, and people got them, like Abraham Lincoln and Michelle Obama, things like that. And my friend, I remember her being I feel like it's Michelle Obama. I'm like, oh my God, you did it.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
With the course, so one of I guess the tagline is, you're going to be able to find your strongest psychic sense. That's what everyone will find. Yeah. And using those exercises is one of the best ways to do that, because I'm like, okay, so you're reading, maybe I'm holding up a postcard, right? You can't see what's on the back of it. And the person's like, oh, I'm seeing a mountain and red, maybe it's sunset, and they getting images of what it could be. And I turned it around, it's like, wow, it absolutely was. And they're like, oh, I saw it, I could see the colors, right? That would be clairvoyance, right? That's the main skill you're using. But then I've had people where maybe I hold a crystal in my hands and they can't see it, and they're like, oh, I feel gritty, I've dropped my food in the sand and I've bitten it, it's all gritty. And maybe that is There's
Tourmaline or something like that. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And there's sandal over it. So I'm like, well, you're using, your
Mhm.
clairgustance. That's amazing. So you've got the sand aspect. So there's so many different ways that these things can come through. One of the girls on, I think the April version of the course last year, clairgustance was her main sense,
Mm.
which is unusual, right? It's not one of
Yeah,
the main, it's the secondary
yeah.
psychic senses. And I would, hold up a card and she would tune in. She'd say, hey, the this side of my tongue is bubbly and tingly, and I can taste like sweet and sour, almost like tart, like an apple. And we'd turn it around and there'd be like, maybe this woman's head and her hair's made of fruit and there's all these apples there. And I'm like, you got that with your tongue. Like, that's so cool.
I know I was teaching a Reiki class to a girl last week or 2 weeks ago, and it was actually on the death anniversary of my mom. And of course, I have grief about this. It's 5 years ago, but I'm not actively hurting all the time, although probably am, but I'm just not feeling it. And she's like, every time you mention your mom's name, my heart hurts. She's like, I feel like a push into my heart. Like it's just like a push. And I'm like, well, today's her anniversary. So, like I carry grief, and then, it took me like a week or two before I had a big cry. So, whether she was just that heart pain association with my mom or it was so subconscious that I wasn't actually feeling the pain, whatever the case is, doesn't matter. It's like, I'm telling her, I'm like, you are clairsentient, and it's just like giving her language for that.
The heart chakra is really it's all about grief, right? And to
Yeah.
feel like pushing into it's almost like it's either it's blocked, right? There's this pressure on it.
Yeah.
That's so
I just love
interesting.
helping people feel normal, like what you're feeling, and I told her about another friend of mine who's super sensitive. Like I don't know that I'm the least clairsentient, but like of all of the senses, it's not my strongest, for sure. I'm more visual and auditory. But I was telling her about a friend of mine who is very sensitive like that. And if someone sits next to her, her heart will start to race. And I start to get like that now, but in the beginning, definitely not. But my one friend, that was her primary. And she actually helped educate me about clairsentience because I saw her and I heard her and she told me, so it's like, just because it's not your thing doesn't mean it doesn't exist, so it's just cool to give people the language to understand what they're feeling or knowing or hearing or seeing or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a really interesting conversation with a girl at a wedding and she ended up becoming a student. So she was the wife of someone I used to work with in the building industry. And we were just chatting and she's like, so, what are you doing now? I haven't seen you in years. And I was like, I'm a witch. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And she was like, oh, that's so cool. And then she said something. She said that I think we got onto the topic of synesthesia. She said, I think I have synesthesia. When some people can hear a song and they see colors. She goes, when I hear people's name or when they talk, I can see patterns around them. And I was like, tell me more about that. And she's like, well, I don't know. It's just this weird thing. Like, for example, when my husband, when he says his name, I can see, this around him. And when I see this person, maybe it's like fabrics, right? Like plaid or lace. Like it was really interesting. And I was like, I think she's seeing auras as fabric, which is and patterns, which is so fascinating to me. But I didn't say this. I'm just sort of like, okay, cool. And I said, look, and it was almost like a little test for her. So I said, all right, can you tell me what you see with me? And I'm like, I know right now, if I was any color in terms of anything, it's going to be purple. That was the feel what my aura was. So I was like, in my head, I was holding, okay, purple is obviously what it's going to be. And I was like, when I say my name, Hana, what do you see around me? And she's like, oh, you're very strongly purple. And I was like, well, you've just proved to me this is a psychic skill. Not just like some random synesthesia thing that you think you have. I was like, I'm telling you, this is going to give you information. And so I sort of tried to lead her down into this is what you could get from that. This is what these colors can mean. Some color correspondence. If you're seeing plaid, maybe it feels traditional, or maybe there's Scottish in there,
Right.
background. Maybe it's this, or
she has to figure out her dictionary still. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. This simple dictionary. So I was telling her about it and she ended up signing up to my course to learn more. So And then the amazing thing about this, and this is why I love being able to talk to people and when I'm teaching students, is they teach me something new. So then I've gone home and gone, wow, okay, if I'm looking at this person, instead of asking myself what color is their aura, what fabric would they be? What texture would they be?
That's so fun.
And it was a fun new exercise for me, and it almost like gave my guides more to work with when they give me images, vibes, textures, that sort of thing. So it's been really fascinating. I've seen now people that come across like moss, and I'm like, that's so cool. Like, and it gives me a lot of information. So it's fascinating to get that from people. And she just thought it was just this normal quirky thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's just, I'm sure some people can do it. I'm like, yeah, they can, but it's not everybody.
It's not a given. It's not a given.
So it's
awesome.
really wonderful to help people do that. Even my mum, she's very clairsentient. And I find a lot of people who are Cancer or Capricorn placements, very, very much clairsentient can be their strongest psychic skill. And my mum used to say these things, she works in HR. And she'd be like, I'm talking to this person about some incident they've done at work. And they're telling me this story. And she goes, do they think I'm an idiot that I don't know they're lying black and blue to my face? And she used to say that all the time. Like, she always knows when people are lying. And she's like, they must think I'm an absolute idiot. And I'm like, no. Most people wouldn't know they're lying.
Right.
Because you can feel it. Like, she'd say, my gut just does this twisty thing. And I'm like, oh, definitely lying. And she just knows. And I'm like, oh, this is why I never got away with anything as a kid.
She just knows.
Now she's sort of realized, because she took it really offensively that people would think she was that silly. And I'm like, no, most people, not that they're silly, but most people don't have access to that sense, or they don't trust that sense.
Right.
Therefore, they don't know that person is lying. So they usually get away with it. And this
Right.
is why you're like, absolutely not, let's go down the path of, formal, whatever it is, just
bullshit
to do.
Detector.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's why she's been so good at interviews. They're always like, everyone you hire turns out to be amazing. And she's like, because I know.
Yeah. That's a great way to use the gift.
Yeah.
You didn't know
she has that language now where she didn't have that language before.
Yeah.
So it's really wonderful to help people, as you said, understand that aspect of themselves.
Yeah, it's really so awesome. It's been so easy to talk to you. It's already been almost an hour, so.
I'm a good talker.
Yeah, I know. I'm gifted in that as well. And then you have your own podcast as well. So what's your podcast called?
It's called the Witch Talks Podcast.
Okay.
I very rarely have episodes under an hour because it's just how it is. But I chat with key witches throughout the community. So it's really, really great. I get to talk to amazing people, and specifically about stuff that I'm not super skilled in, so that, my audience can learn from other people as well, about a whole range of topics. So it's really wonderful.
That's really cool. I know, because I listened to the one episode you had about, you were talking to some guy about the religious upbringing. So that's why that was in my head,
Yeah. There's a few. So if anyone does have religious trauma, I do discuss that in multiple episodes on the podcast. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 now that really center that aspect. So it's good to have those discussions and to address some of the trauma that can come through religion, and how that can impact us on our spiritual journey. So, for example, I didn't buy a deck of tarot cards for way too long because I was terrified a demon was going to jump out at me. Right?
Yeah.
That never happened, obviously.
Well, I've talked about that too. A friend of mine gifted them to me, and I was like, oh, why did she do that? Doesn't she know they're tools of the devil? And then I'd pull High Priestess left and right constantly. And then I got scared at night, and I was like, it's probably just my guides being like, hey girl, but I was like, I feel a presence at night. I don't know if I want them in my room anymore. And then that was when I was 19. And then when I was 20, 30 or something, that's when I started on the spiritual journey, so that's when I bought a new deck of cards for myself, because I'd given that deck away, because I was like, I don't know if I want these. But so I know it takes a little bit of disentangling of those religious programs and things like that. Absolutely. Like being scared of waking up at 3 a.m, because my dad told me it was the hour of the beast, the hour of the devil. It's that's the most holy time to be awake. It's self within. So there's a lot we got to unpack.
And if you have fear, it's one of the best ways to block your abilities as well. So it's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about.
So yeah, people just should definitely follow you because you're just fun to watch and to learn from. So what's your handle on Instagram? It's Suburban_Witchery, right?
Correct. Yeah. On Instagram, there's an underscore.
Right.
So and be aware of scam accounts as well. I never DM people first. I don't offer readings via WhatsApp or anything like that.
No, I've gotten them before for mine, and I'm like, people like they don't even sound like they're speaking English, like
Yeah.
first language, So
Yeah. So
it's clear, but yeah, it's like those disclaimers are necessary because it's stupid. People are just taking advantage of others. It's bad.
So if anyone wants to follow me, just make sure that it's Suburban_Witchery. I'm also on Facebook. I have tons of content on my YouTube as well, so you can deep dive into lots of different things. You can sign up for the waitlist for the course, so that puts you on the email waitlist, which means you'll get the access to the early bird and all of that sort of stuff that's going to be coming out. Yes, it's going to be exciting. So I'd
When
love to
does the
see.
class start? What date?
So September 22nd is when we're going to be opening the doors for people
Okay.
to register. So there'll be a 2-week enrollment, and then basically start of October is when we're going to be starting classes.
Very cool. Oh, I'm excited, and hopefully, just from doing this, more people will find you. So
Yay! I'd love to have more people on board. It's going to be super, super fun.
it sounds like it'll be a party. So thank you so much for spending some time with me, Hannah. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.